Hey, Anna. Hi.
Good to see
How are
you.
you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm great. And I'm looking forward to the conversation. I'd like to start, if you don't mind, with asking you to tell a little bit about your journey to become the chair of the Deloitte Global Board of Directors. And how do you see yourself making an impact as global chair?
Well, thank you for that. And I have to say, firstly, I am absolutely thrilled to be here and be here physically, actually, in this studio, to be part of this
Right.
fantastic event. It's hugely inspirational listening to some of the discussions that have gone on so far today. And in terms of my journey, I guess a bit of an unusual one, given I'm in professional services, but I started life out as a psychology graduate, working with families with children with learning disability, giving developmental, emotional funding support through the agency I worked with. And that gave me a real first-hand, practical, and I would say somewhat sobering insight at that relatively young age over what social imbalance, a lack of ability to embrace diverse talent and to bring the best out of people, and just general inequality. That impact was huge. And I vowed to myself that really from then on in, I needed to find a way to have an impact. And so I thought, well, if I go away and become perhaps more commercially astute, understand how things really work in these big organizations and how that can impact the things that we face in society. So I became an accountant, a chartered accountant, a big change from what I was doing before. And I've been hugely lucky. I've worked with some amazing global, hugely impactful and inspiring organizations over the years. But I've also worked with fantastic professional teams within Deloitte, working with them, building those teams, building their skills, supporting, engaging, mentoring and coaching. That's been a big part of what I do. And when therefore it comes to Deloitte, we are a global organization of significant scale. With that brings tremendous responsibility to have a positive impact, an impact that matters with our clients, our people, our societies, our communities, our planet. And so as the chair of the board, I feel that responsibility very strongly. And as you know, many commentators would say, if you're the chair of a board, and if you are a board, you should be representing the conscience of your organization. And so I very much see the impact I need to make, which is about embedding our purpose, our culture, our ethics, making that impact as a global organization. So that's a core part of my role.
Yeah, very clear. So how do you see yourself making an impact as global chair? And you talked about that, but then you mentioned values. So how does Peace Day align with Deloitte's purpose and values and your own?
Well, do you know what? I was at an interesting event last week, and one of the speakers at the event was talking about how he feels he can articulate his impact, his personal impact. And he said at this event, you need to go to the 17 SDGs and look through and just work out where you want to focus and amplify that focus, because that's how you can really, really amplify the impact that you have. So there I am in the audience scrolling through my phone, reminding myself of all 17. But in all seriousness, it really is a helpful anchor. And when I think about what we do and how that bridges to, say, SDG 16, as any of us are talking about today, it is about the environment that we create, both within our organization and outside of it. So the environment, if we think about, we are an organization, a family of around 450,000 people. We want all of our people to be in an environment where they are safe, they are developing, they are welcomed, they are an inclusive environment. So not just welcomed, but fully part of that environment where they're growing. Yeah. And for us, that's a real key part of what we do. That whole well-being aspect, mental health, physical health, embracing all of that within our organization. And when I think about what we're doing in the communities to bring that to life as well, we have what we call our world-class program. But fundamentally, this is about our intent to have a positive impact to empower 100 million people by the year 2030. And we already started doing all of that. That's about the programs we have around health equity, around education in health, around empowering women through higher education, around the work we do with refugee communities, around skills and other aspects. So these are all some of the practical things that we do that really just shows that the intention of days like today to raise the profile of some of these things really is embedded within our purpose. And I personally, not only am I personally involved with some of these activities, but I personally take that responsibility to make sure our executive has it at the core of all the decision making that we do as an organisation. That's how we can be really purpose-driven, purpose-led.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It is so opportune. I mean, we live in a very pivotal moment in time, and we need to make fundamentally important decisions for our shared future. And I was wondering, how do you see the private sector's role in aiding the building of a more peaceful and more sustainable future?
Yeah, it's a really important question because I think the expectations of the private sector have changed enormously over the last couple of decades. And I would argue quite rightly too. We define stakeholders much more broadly than we ever have done in the past. And we have an obligation to consider the demands, the needs and the expectations of those stakeholders when we're making decisions. And when we think about the ESG agenda in the business community, all boards, all businesses have a responsibility to protect the resilience of their organisation. And really embedding ESG is a big part of that journey. And we can't do that if we do that in small silos. So the private sector needs to come to the party and do that collaboratively. If we do that as individual organisations or in a siloed way, then we are only going to inadvertently exacerbate some of the inequalities that exist already. So, for example, the disproportionate impact of climate change and sustainability intentions between the global north and the global south, as an example. So the private sector has a role in that sense, but it also has a role more deliberately. So if we think about Ukraine, of course, many organisations, including ours, have spent considerable time and worry around how do we best support and secure our colleagues in Ukraine. We have a number of colleagues working in Ukraine, and our priority action initially was about their safety. But now it's about the private sector role in thinking ahead to the future reconstruction of Ukraine. What does that plan look like? And that collaboration between organisations, private business, government organisations and so on is really important if we're going to set those foundations. So it's very important that the private sector steps up to that. I know we're stepping up to that, and that's never going to end.
Well, you mentioned Ukraine, but if more broadly, can you tell a little bit more about what Deloitte is doing to support organization in the journey towards a more peaceful and sustainable world?
Yeah, and I guess I would probably take this in two ways. There's the elements that we do with clients, and there's the pieces that we do because of the ecosystems in which we operate. So in terms of our clients, our fundamental service offering, if you like, as a professional services firm, is to help organizations be more successful. So that might be their strategies, their infrastructure, their organizational model, operational model, organizational design, their technology strategy and build, their culture, their people, their human capital aspects, all of those aspects. And I'd include into that, and in fact, this morning, I had a session with our leaders around financial crime and fraud. Built into that success is protection of those businesses and making sure they have compliance in those areas as well. And if we can help make those organizations more successful, an organization that is successful has more choices as to then what to do. Yep. And then to be collaborative in the way of guiding those choices in order that they're good for business and good for society, good for people, good for the world, good for our planet. But then if we think about some of the things that we do deliberately outside of perhaps our pure client aspect, So I mentioned the elements that we are leaning into around the reconstruction of Ukraine, but this is also about working with the German Marshall Fund, for example, more broadly, ensuring that sort of transatlantic cooperation and collaboration to tackle some of the most important societal and planetary issues that we face. The long-standing strategic partnership that we have with the World Economic Forum, that is really important for us. Collaborating, convening a whole variety of business leaders and leaders from all sectors to influence and talk about how we shape policy, how we shape intention, how we shape frameworks to tackle some of those challenges. And then even directly on the ground, we have an international development practice that works in developing countries, for example, around establishing government, ensuring transparency and accountability. All of these things go towards that whole piece around purpose, but purpose in the context of peace, stability, accountability, honourability. And that's, I think, some of the things that's a snapshot of some of the things that we're doing.
Very much relate to that. So I have one more question, and probably the most important question, because you talked about Deloitte, what Deloitte is doing. You talked about your own role and contribution, role within Deloitte. But we've got viewers, from all walks of life, from different, places in the hierarchy of companies and organizations that they work for. And my last question is really about the individual. So can you talk a little bit about what you see that all the individuals listening in now and later on to this conversation, what do you see as the individual's role in how to engage in making the future a more peaceful and sustainable one?
I'm really glad you asked that question, because I strongly believe that every single one of us as an individual has a responsibility to have that positive impact. And if we leave it to big organisations or other parties, it won't happen. It is about the actions each of us individually take every single minute of every single day. And that's really, really key. And if I think about our family, our 450,000 strong family at Deloitte, we spend a lot of time in the education and development of our people. So if I give you an example, we rolled out some training around climate change, around ethics and integrity and other related topics to all of our people globally. And that's consistent. That's on a rolling basis. And if we just think about if every single one of that person takes something new they've learned that day and they take it home and they say to a family member or a friend, I learned this today, let's do something about it. All of a sudden, that's 900,000 people. Then they go and speak to somebody and you're at 1.8 million people. I'm going to stop there before my maths skills limit what I can say. But in all seriousness, you start to look at that butterfly and that ripple effect. And that's why the individual actions are so important. And what organizations can do to help individuals, and like ours, and we do this, is not only educate, but also give them the environment where they can start to work out what is the impact I want to have. So we have, for example, community days where people take a day and they do something they're passionate about. And they can take those days throughout the year and they're given the space and the time and the resources to go and do that. And that's one way that we as individuals can do that. And no one's exempt from having a personal impact. It can be a really small impact, but it means so much to those of us around us. Really important, the individual impact we can all have.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I so agree with you on the potential. You have more than 400,000 employees. That's 400,000 people that you individually, touch, inspire, and motivate to engage. But I guess the same is true if you're in a company of 10 people or 100 people.
Absolutely.
The principle is the same. And so business can make a difference as a business, but also as the individuals within that business.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's amazing how we can really amplify what we can all achieve by working as individuals, but also working together as teams and spreading the word.
Great. Fantastic. And many thanks for this conversation and have a lovely day.
Great to see you. Thank you so much.